Okay, from this point on, the stone, you can see it is starting to turn into a matte finish. And I can take my number 7 spatula and expose the sides of the flask. And I can just wipe off the excess right up against the edge of the bench here. Be sure to expose this little lip right here of the flask. I'm not going all the way to the model. I'm just trying to expose the edge of the flask now using the back side of my font stock. I got a little bubble in here that I can just vibrate and possibly pick up some of the excess that I have right here and place it back in there. Feather everything, and now I can use the tip of the font stock to scrape the rest of it. Possibly fill in any voids you might have created. And right here, I'm going to angle it this way, so I'm scraping right to the edge of the model. And then with my fingertip, just gently wipe and smooth out the surface. I'm going to do it over running water as well, but I'm going to let the stone set a little bit more before I do that. Otherwise, I'm just going to remove a lot of investment right now. Notice that this part of the investment does not overlap the land area. So the land area is completely exposed. I'm going to add a little bit right here. And as I'm doing this with my finger, I'm starting to feel that the stone is starting to set a little bit more. So at this point, we can go over to the sink. And gently just wipe over the stone with your fingertip. And what this does, it creates a nice smooth finish for the second layer. All right, so we're going to leave this here. And we can do the same thing with our lower. So I got some stone mixed here. We'll go over to the sink. Too much water. That's about there. So a nice thick consistency. Initially spatulate, just hand spatulate. But then we have to further spatulate over the vibrator for about 20 to 30 seconds to get a nice even homogeneous mix. And once again, upon final spatulation off the vibrator, the stone should hold its own weight. So back to this now. I'm going to introduce some stone into the lower half of the flask. Just going to feather the stone all the way to the edge of the flask. Clean off my hands. And then bring my lower model and vibrate it gently into position until I bottom out, or until the land area of the cast is at the same height with the ledge of the flask. So once again, you don't want to overdo it now. Just let the stone set a little bit, because otherwise things will get a little bit messy. While this is setting, I'm going to go back to the upper one and just give it one more wipe. with not too cold of water or too hot, obviously, because it'll melt the wax up, but you don't want to have super cold water because it could affect your wax up, could shrink the wax excessively, and therefore changing the position of the teeth. So if you noticed here now, this surface of the investment is very smooth. Very smooth. Wipe off a little bit there. So now we can go back to the lower, and once again, we're going to use the back of our fond stock to wipe off the excess, and again, you just want to expose the ledge of the flask. Don't go all the way in if you don't have to. In this area, I will. And again, wipe it up against the bench. It's a little convenient. And once again, we got this front lip here that we need to wipe away. And in here, you don't want to be creating any undercuts in here. If you've trimmed your model properly, after you poured it way back when you were making the master cast, it should make it a whole lot easier if you don't have any undercuts here. And that's the case here. Still a little bit soft, so I'm going to let that set just a little bit more before I carve it a little more with my fond stock. So I'm going to let that set. While that's setting, I can clean up the stone, and therefore I'm keeping my immediate working area relatively clean. So we're going to continue to let that set. And I'm going to go back to my fond stock, and you can certainly, a little bit of stone like that, you can wipe it up against your hand here as you're rotating around. Once more, we don't want to have stone overlapping the land area of the cast. So, and you want to make sure that you're creating inclines here to prevent any undercuts. Back here. And I'm wiping the excess up against my glove here. When you're doing this procedure, it goes without saying you should be wearing your proper PPE, which are gloves, mask, and eye protection, especially when you're using the hot water. So that's getting pretty hard now, so I can give it a gentle wipe with my fingertip. And this is something you have to time just right. You can't rush it. You gotta wait for the stone to set a little bit. So I'm just gonna set it down, wipe off the excess here. And while that's setting, I'm gonna clean off my bowl and spatula, and by the time I do that, I can come back and wipe it off some more.